Hi, everyone. Actually, I am fresh off the set of Morning Express, 10 a.m. on the East, and this is a really important Instagram Live for today because I don't know about you, this has been the first week of school for us. We are fortunate enough that our little guy was able to go back into the class, but in every single conversation I've had with a parent in this school year, the number one most difficult decision was whether or not to send them back to in-person learning if they had that option. And so I actually have asked Dr. Darria Long, who has been an expert for us on CNN and HLN. She also happens to be a fellow parent with me at our children's school. They go to the same school together. And so today was the first day, but I don't know if you were watching the show, but on Morning Express, we just talked about school after school that has been back in the last few weeks and how many cases of coronavirus have popped up. It made me pause. It made me wonder whether or not I made the right decision. And that's why we really want to try and get some medical advice on whether or not this is the right decision. So we're waiting for Dr. Darria to hop on. But one of the things that I felt like was super important here is that each and every one of you that's joining asks the questions that are in your own minds, the things that you're worried about. And hold on one second, let me see. So in this little comment section where you press the question mark, oh, thanks, Mackenzie. That's sweet Mackenzie that was just bringing in the makeup bag that I left in the studio. She's the only person actually I see on set. So Dr. Darria is here with us now. Let me bring her in here. So I was trying to ask a question of Dr. Darria. I will try and get to all of the ones that you have. And as we wait for her to join in, there she is. Hello, it's great to see you.
How are you?
I'm great. Happy first day of school. I know our children headed off today.
I know.
Actually, it was a bittersweet thing. I was just telling everyone before you hopped on that I felt really confident in my decision before this morning when I was on Morning Express and just school after school reporting on how many COVID cases that they're having. Now, I said from the very beginning, there is no right answer to the question of whether or not you should do this.
Yeah.
The factor for me was in how my school was handling, and your school as well, was handling the situation. They have the ability for outdoor classrooms, smaller classrooms,
Right.
and they just had it all under control. Now, if you have 50 kids in a class, it would have been really different for me. So I just want to start off with, do you think that we made the right decision in sending them back to the classrooms?
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
This is a decision that has to be made family by family. So as you mentioned, there are big things that I look at. And yes, I do. I think the bottom line is that we have made the right decision. I think it's a decision that we all families will be making every week or so. So none of us are making a decision for the entire semester, but for right now, with the amount of things that our school was able to do, then yes, I think it is the right decision.
Yeah, some of those things, in case you're wondering, for those that are watching, I mean, they have all of the children obviously in masks, all the teachers in masks, but they're just really not going anywhere. It's almost like they've got the kids in a bubble, in or out of the classroom. Parents aren't going in. It seems so structured. I've also done stories on some schools that have outdoor industrial tents.
Right.
So these are the measures that I'm feeling comfortable about.
Exactly. And I think that's what you look at. There's, I want parents to kind of go through a number of questions. And the first question is, what is the prevalence in my community? So like we can set that aside for now, because the second question is what we're talking about is, what is the school able to do? So are the schools doing everything in terms of masking, universal masking, kids and teachers alike? Are they able to maintain small, stable cohorts and distances? Are they able to be outside? Meeting with our teachers yesterday, they said, we are going to be outside as much as possible. And they are doing cleaning and not mixing and students and other groups. So all of these things are required. If a school cannot do that, if they can't mandate that or they don't have the funding, then I would not send my child to school in that situation.
We have a viewer that's asking, Mrs. Gatorman 4177, thank you for chiming in. You say, what about teachers that are in a high-risk category? Are they given any extra protection? That's kind of a difficult question for Darria to answer just because it's going to be so different everywhere. But should they be given extra protection, and what does that protection look like? Is it
Yeah.
just you really can't do it if you're high risk?
So it depends on what your high risk. I think anybody who's potentially in high risk, they need to talk to their doctor about what it is. If you are in high risk, I think first thing, say you're high risk because you're a diabetic or something else, then get your condition under control. So diabetics who have poorly controlled blood sugar versus a diabetic who has their sugar under control, the diabetic who's poorly controlled has 4 times the risk of complications. So diabetes itself doesn't put you in necessarily in the high risk, because if you can get it under control, you're back into medium risk group. So that's first thing, is make sure whatever your condition is, it's under control with medications. Number 2, yeah, you can talk to your school if you're vulnerable and saying, can I be a virtual teacher? Can I be the one doing that? Because teachers, there'll be students that have to be virtual this year. And even if a school is not virtual, there will be students who can't be at school. So they're going to need virtual teaching. And then thirdly, I think anyone who's vulnerable, wear a mask, wear a face shield in addition to it. And I just put a post out with like all sorts of other different things teachers can do, taking things that I have do in the ER. So how do I avoid bringing COVID home to my family? So I just realized there's about 15 different things I do. And I shared a post on that of everything they can do to keep them safe.
You have a mask guide as well on your website,
Yes.
right?
I do. I've done a bunch on masking, and I actually brought a couple. So my daughter this is a face shield I have her wearing. This is the sticker. You would take the sticker off. And I have her wearing a mask. So incidentally, I wasn't sure if she'd wear it. She's a first grader. She wore it to orientation. She took it off. But then yesterday I went to pick her up after 6 hours and she was wearing it. And I said, wow, you're wearing your face shield. And she said, yes, mommy, because so many people told me today it was very cool.
Oh,
It's like, I'm here. So she's wearing it all the time because she's the cool kid wearing the astronaut mask. So any parents that are worried, you can get this little mask. And Lynn, I can find the link for you if anybody wants it.
Yeah, please do. I'm actually going to send it to my sister-in-law because she's at that same school as well. Words with Chris is asking whether you think parents should send their kids back or not. Do you think school systems should at least offer the option if the local health department says it's okay? Because this is something I've talked about all the time. Mm-hmm. Parents can't work and virtually teach. Parents can't leave the house if their kids are at home learning. We need people to get back to work.
Right. There's like so many downstream effects of this. So I think there's 2 things. One is you can't, if the school truly says we cannot have everybody masked, we have too many people to have distance, if we truly can't, then I don't know that you can force a school to stay open. But I question if that is the case, because a lot of schools, even the public schools that have larger groups, could say, well, we're going to get half of our kids back on alternating days. You know, if you don't have large space, that's one thing you can do. So you have half of the students in class and half of them out. And that way you can keep that distance. And everybody can mandate masking. Everybody can do that. Populations may not want to do that, but I say if a parent doesn't want to mask their child, then virtually teach your children. And I think the other thing schools need to look at and parents need to look at is people say they're keeping their kids out of school, but then they're going to these like groups of kids in somebody's basement to learn. I'm like, that is not any safer than having our kids at school. So I think we need to look at how is it possible, as much as possible, with a variety of arrangements to get our kids back.
Zach W 2007 is saying, hi, Mrs. Smith. How are those children of yours these days? First of all, saying Mrs. Smith makes me feel like I'm 100 years old.
I was like, who's Mrs. Smith?
I know. That's my mother-in-law. But the children are fabulous. Thank you for asking, because they're healthy, and that's the most important thing. But Darria, this is actually one of the reasons why I decided to send him back, because we had that option. He was really struggling. He needs social interaction. Yeah. You know, he's 4.5 years old. He's going into pre-K. He was so confused about school being abruptly taken away from him, and then also confused. And another factor in my decision, and I'm curious to see whether or not you think that this is right, he was going to be around and exposed to children who were going to school. So for example, his cousins, who we are with all the time and we love so much, they were going to be in class. So if we strip that of him, but then saw them, we're still mingling the possibility that he could be exposed. So I felt like the benefits outweighed it. Did you think about the same stuff with yours?
I think that's right. So remember, we said there's 4 questions. What's your prevalence? What's the school able to do? What's your family risk? And then there's the 4th question of how do you weigh all of these things together? Because there is no zero risk option.
Yeah.
And we have to acknowledge that. And like, so you said your child would be around other kids who are going to school, or some other alternative. So we have to really weigh that and accept that there is no zero risk option, which is why there's not a wrong decision for parents right now. But yes.
I also want to ask this question, which I can't fact check this right now. So I would ask you to fact check it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Zach is saying the New England Journal of Medicine said that a mask doesn't help much outside a hospital setting in the recent past. Are they wrong?
So this is a really interesting question. And Lynn, I like to be totally transparent with the information. Up until now, largely evidence had been studied on masks in hospital settings. We know masks in hospital settings do an enormous amount to curb spread. They hadn't been studied in the general population. And there's, and when you look at the general population, not using N95 masks, but just like regular paper masks and the way that people aren't using them perfectly, it's true to say that no, masks are not the single one thing that will save us all. Masks are one key tool. So they will prevent spread to some extent, some fraction of it. And it's kind of like you do a layer and you're doing the masking and you're doing the distancing and all these other things, and they add up to a significant way we can protect ourselves. So Zach is not wrong in that no, masks have not been shown to prevent 100% of disease or even 50% of disease, but they are a layer of protection.
Yeah, and we've also shown those images where how far a cough goes if you aren't wearing a mask, and how far it goes if you're wearing a mask. And it's clear evidence there.
Exactly.
Dino, who is always chiming in with questions on my Instagram Live, so we thank you for that. He's saying, as parents, we fear sending our kids to school, but how do we manage the fear in them? What do we tell our kids? How do you explain what dangerous disease this is, and social distancing, etc.? I had this exact conversation with my son. I was trying to sort of engage him about going back to school, and I was asking him what he wanted to pick out to wear. Mm-hmm. And then I said, okay, let's pick out which mask you want to wear. And he said, Mommy, why do I have to wear a mask? I don't understand. And I said, mm-hmm. Now the way I try and do this is I say, remember, we talk about the virus that has the germs and it can give you a cold, but we are trying to prevent that. So we wear the mask. We want to protect other people. And this is not going to be forever. I try and set that expectation that this is not going to be his life for the rest of the life, that he has to worry about getting sick, but I don't know what the world I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think the conversation you're going to have with your child is going to differ by your child's age and your child's personality. Some kids need to be reassured because they're really anxious. Some kids need to have a little bit of fear here because they think this is nothing. And I saw a bunch of 12-year-olds the other day and they were just congregating. And I was like, children, please give me some space. So it depends. I think what you said is exactly right. What I'm telling my children is this is something we do. Just like I put on a seatbelt, and when I click my seatbelt on, I don't put it on with fear that there's going to be a car accident. And we need to think about it like that. Like I put my kids in their car seat, again, not out of fear that there's going to be a car accident, but this is another way that can protect us. So I tell my daughter, this is what I'm wearing. I know it's not, you don't love it. I know it's hot. This is not for forever. And this is an extra step we're doing for now to protect ourselves and to protect the people that we love.
A conversation that happened over and over again in our house. I felt pretty strongly about wanting to send him back. I knew he needed the socialization. My husband really felt a lot more reserved about it, feeling like this is an experiment. And it is. It's a fair point. We don't know. We don't have the data. Do you think it's an experiment? I mean, do you think that it's that extreme that we're sort of experimenting with our kids back in school?
I think the schools that are letting kids back in with no masking and no social, no distancing or anything else, they are an experiment. In fact, they're not even, an experiment means you don't know the outcome. I think I know what's going to happen in those schools. So they're technically not even an experiment. But for those schools that we talked about, your prevalence is low enough and the school's able to do everything, and the school is rapidly, like part of the things the school has to do, masking, distancing, how are they rapidly identifying and isolating cases? They have to have an answer for you for that. And if a school doesn't have those things in place that we've talked about, then I think, yes, in those situations, I wouldn't send my child to school because they are doing not a great experiment. And we don't want our kids to be part of an experiment. Otherwise, it's not an experiment. It is something where I say, this is a controlled risk. There is no zero risk. We have done everything we can to go forward, and we will. And the big question is, how long will we be able to stay open? Just if enough kids are having runny noses and things, the school may end up having to shut down for that reason. But if you look at it that way and we follow these 4 steps we're talking about, then it's not so much an experiment, but a controlled risk we're taking.
Something that has been a factor for a lot of people is, oh, well, okay, well, what if our children have asthma and they're a little bit more high risk? I reached out, my son has asthma, and I reached out to his pulmonologist, and I've heard from a lot of different people saying, listen, what we're seeing in children is even if they have some of those respiratory issues, it doesn't seem to be that extreme if they get it. Do you agree?
So much of seeing the disease in children has been low because we've not been in school. We do have to acknowledge that. But I do think, again, if a child has a condition and they're well controlled, that's going to help your risk. But any condition, you did the exactly right thing. Every child in that situation, I can't even give guidance on what the parents should do beyond talk to your pediatrician. And I think every parent should be given the option that if they think prevalence is too high, school's not doing the right things, they have too much high risk in their family, or it's just more risk in their family or their kids, or just more risk than they want to do, you have to be able to have a virtual option. I think there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to do the virtual option, and maybe I do it for the first 2 weeks or the first month, and then we reevaluate. So every kid is different.
Yeah. I know this may be the most impossible question to answer, but how long do you think we're going to be doing this for? I mean, honestly, I was like, oh, well, it'll be till, April. Then I was like, maybe June. Oh, wait, it's almost September and we're in it. And it didn't have a sleepy summer season.
No, Lynn, I don't think this is going away this school year. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if you think about the vaccine, even if it comes out best case scenario in January, it's not going to be given to kids. It's going to be given to healthcare workers and nursing home residents. It might never be given to kids. I don't know. So I think for the whole school year, this will be an issue. But I don't think, what I'm telling people at the schools that I'm advising, I say, I want initial hypervigilance. When we go back to school, we are super strict about it. And if you have a positive contact, you're going home for 14 days. Your siblings are out for, a period of time, depending on the situation, because we have to be super strict, because my goal is to keep whatever percentage of kids in school as long as we can. So we need to isolate any positive cases. Eventually, I hope as we get more data, we can start to loosen that a bit. So I hope if we can stay very strict up front, we have the best chance of staying in school the longest and being able to slowly lower restrictions.
So that's interesting, because you are advising our school. That brought me a lot of comfort as well, knowing that was the case. But I really didn't ask the question, what happens if there is a positive? Does the entire school shut down? What is your advice for schools if they have a positive?
So we have to acknowledge that whatever the prevalence is of the disease in the community, it's going to come into the school. Since we have not done a very good job of cleaning up our communities, we cannot expect the schools to fix the problem of our communities. But so positive cases will walk into the school, but it's upon the school to say, how quickly did they stop the transmission of it? That's what we don't. We don't want schools amplifying COVID. So if there's a positive case, especially in young kids, I say anybody, lower school or younger, even if the schools are doing distancing, which they should, if there's a positive case in that class, you assume that they didn't do it perfectly and the entire class goes home. And that's exactly, and isolates for 14 days. That's what I mean by initial hypervigilance. I want to be so strict that if we know of any contacts, we get them isolated so that so you have to know that there are some you don't even know about. But if we can be really hypervigilant on the ones we do, I think that gives us the best chance. It's harder for parents because it's a lot of isolating, but I think it gives us the greatest chance.
Yeah. I want to ask the obvious question of it's baffling to all of us in the news when we cover something like Cherokee County in Georgia, where they opened and there were classrooms packed and students eventually got COVID. They eventually had to shut it down, but there was a real divide between parents that really thought this was political. This isn't a threat. We don't need to be taking this seriously. And then the other group that said, we need to have these strict things in place. What do you say to the person who still doesn't really believe there's a great enough threat to do things like these measures of keeping kids home?
I say, I want to open up our economy. I want to get kids back to school. And if we are not doing these measures and we have COVID spreading, that's not going to happen. Even if it's not me making rules, people are scared enough by it, that they inherently will not open up the economy. They will not go back to their prior level. So if we want to be able to do those things, then again, initial hypervigilance with the goal that eventually we can reduce restrictions. But let's just do it. Let's get back. I think we all want our kids back to school. We all want to open up the economy. Let's set aside politics and say, if we can be super strict to begin with, let's do everything we can. And then we can start to figure out which were the most important things and peel the others away. But we can't do that if we have to stay shut down because there's too many cases.
I love it. You make such great points, Darria. And for our viewers, Darria, can you give people some information on where they can find you, where they can get some more info on your mask guide and things like that?
Yes, of course. So right where we are right here, Instagram, Dr. Darria, Darria, is where I'm posting the most relevant stuff, most up-to-date stuff, a couple of videos every week. And you can find my mask guide. If somebody can't find it, they can just DM me or put in the comments or another post, say, where's your mask guide? Or the guide that I just shared about what teachers can do. Of course, I'm on Twitter and Facebook, same handle, or drdarria.com. Just doing my best to help make everyone's lives healthier, better, and easier, which is what we all need right now.
We thank you for it. All of your hard work is just something that is saving so many lives out there, and you're doing such great work. But I also want to say thank you to all of our teachers out there. If this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that you all should be paid millions and millions and millions of dollars. And the fact that you are coming into the classroom and doing all of this for our kids so that they can grow and learn, it's just amazing. So we thank you. And Darria, thank you as well.
Thank you, Lynn. Have a great day. And yes, thank you to our teachers. And we can do everything we can to keep our teachers safe.
That's right. Take care.
Right. Bye.